And good evening once again. Day 1226 of the Trump administration, 158 days now until the presidential election. Tonight, Minneapolis is under curfew until 6 a.m. Central Time on Saturday. But the protesters who have been on the streets for the past several hours, for that matter, the past several nights, remain there, all of it stemming from the death of George Floyd. Today, the now former police officer who kneeled on Mr. Floyd's neck has been charged in Mr. Floyd's death, but the anger, the outrage have not gone away. We want to start things off by going to Ali Velshi, who is still with us from the streets of Minneapolis. Ali, a couple of things. I know you have changed positions. Tell us the reason for that and confirm for us these reports we've been hearing that police have pulled back again and there are long stretches of the city with no police presence again tonight.
Yes. In fact, I would argue, Brian, that there are more stretches of the city without police presence than there were last night. It was a remarkable scene that started in the 9 p.m. Eastern hour, right when that curfew began. About 10 minutes before it, the police announced that you'll be arrested if you don't move. They started firing tear gas, and then something that nobody expected, the police and the National Guard, these are state police, various other agencies, I didn't see any Minneapolis police at all, and the National Guard all started moving backward. They walked backward for well over a mile or mile and a half, as far as I can see. At one point, they stopped and sort of did running battle with the protesters with tear gas, and the protesters just did not pull back. I had a mask, but the protesters didn't have masks, and they just stood there and kept on moving forward, and eventually the National Guard and the police have dissipated. They walked down major stretches of the city all the way to downtown, from South Minneapolis into downtown. There are crowds of people assembled, including just beyond this bridge where those lights are. Various parts of the city, there are groups that have assembled, but the idea of a curfew, I can guarantee you, because we've been on the streets since the curfew began, is not in place. For whatever reason, and we do not know whether, Brian, this was a strategic decision on the part of the National Guard and the police and the mayor and the governor to say, let's dissipate the crowds by pulling them back on what became ultimately a march more than a protest, or whether the protest overcame the resistance of authorities. What we did not see, very interestingly, is we did not see interaction or much interplay between the police and the protesters, except for the firing of canisters, although Micah Grimes, one of our digital producers who is here, did get struck by a National Guardsman and in his side with something. We have not been able to determine what the something was. It did not appear to be tear gas. We don't know whether it was rubber bullets or whether it was something else. So that was unusual, because we weren't really in a position where the National Guard should be firing on us. But there was a great deal of confusion, because the protesters walked into this mist of tear gas. You can hear helicopters. These are now military National Guard helicopters above the city. I have not seen any media helicopters in the last little while, but there is a heavy police presence in the city today, Brian, that we didn't see, but not police control. They are here, but they're not controlling the streets, and they are not maintaining a curfew tonight, Brian.
And, Ali, as you know, the governor, with some ceremony and some emotion, said today that the state was going to act and the National Guard was being sent in because the city couldn't handle it last night. And starting with those words, we sure thought today and tonight were going to be different.
And today was different, I will tell you that. What the police and the National Guard achieved was a perimeter around that area that you and I were talking from last night, around that intersection where the 3rd Precinct was. Probably 3 blocks in every direction, the police had sealed it off with jersey barriers, concrete barriers, so that cars couldn't get through, not the metal barriers that could be moved. And there were no protesters in that area for the entire day. They were dissipated to separate sort of quadrants in small groups with police and National Guard's presence in front of them. And then it all came apart at 8 p.m. local time, 9 p.m. Eastern. Announcements came out. We saw at about 10 minutes to 9, all the police and the National Guard's people donning their gas masks. Our team did the same thing, because obviously something was coming. The tear gas was deployed, and then they backed out and they were gone. And I think there was some sense that with that much tear gas, the crowd would dissipate or would hold back. And it was incredible to see that that did not happen. So it is unclear whether, same question we had last night, whether this is strategic or not, whether the decision to not engage with protesters in anything that feels like combat or confrontation is part of the strategy, or whether the plan to keep everybody at bay did not work. Because right now, not just in this city, but as you've been reporting, or you will be reporting, across the country, these protests are overwhelming the ability for police forces to keep them in line, and that is what has happened here. So the one interesting thing at this hour, the protest has dissipated. There are groups across the city. It is not a mass protest like it was last night, but it is not a curfew either.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.